When love starts to feel heavy, when the person who once made you feel safe now makes you second, guess your every move. That's not love anymore. That's control. And the most dangerous part, it happens slowly, quietly. One, it's just a suggestion at a time. One, I'm only saying this because I care at a time until you look in the mirror and realize you're shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. Today, I want to show you how to recognize it, how to protect yourself from it, and how to walk back into your own power. Control doesn't start loud, it starts subtle. It begins in the quiet corners of your relationship, in the places where you least expect it. The person who once made you feel chosen now makes you feel checked. The person who once admired your independence now questions it. And it happens so slowly that you can barely point to the moment where love began turning into something else. That's why so many people stay stuck. They don't recognize the shift as it's happening. They think they're protecting the relationship, when in reality, they're slowly losing themselves inside it. It often begins with harmless comments. I don't like when you wear that. Why do you need to go out so much? I'm just trying to look out for you. These sentences sound caring on the surface, but underneath, they're small tests. Tests to see how much of yourself you're willing to give up. Tests to see if you'll bend. Because once you bend a little, controlling people learn that they can push a little more. And they do. Not all at once, piece by piece. That's how control works. It chips away at you until one day you wake up and realize you're living by rules you never agreed to. People who try to control you rarely start by taking away big things. They start with your time, your friendships, your routines. They create doubt in places where you used to feel confident. They make you believe certain things are not good for the relationship, when really, those things are just not good for their ability to control you. And the frightening part is how easy it is to mistake control for care, especially when you love someone deeply. You tell yourself they're just being protective. You tell yourself they just want what's best for you. You tell yourself that adjusting a little is normal in relationships. Because when love is involved, you don't think about red flags, you think about giving, compromising, understanding, preserving. But here's what most people don't notice: love doesn't shrink you. Control does. And when someone is slowly shrinking your world, they're not protecting you. They're managing you. They're shaping you into someone easier for them to predict, easier for them to influence, easier for them to keep dependent. And dependency is the soil where control grows best. The next stage is psychological. They make you question your memory, your judgment, your reactions. They start saying things like, you're overreacting, you're imagining it, you're too emotional. These words are designed to weaken your trust in yourself, so you rely more on them. Because once you stop trusting your own mind, you start depending on theirs. And when someone gains access to your self-doubt, they gain access to your decisions, your boundaries, your identity. That's the part of control most people never see until much later, how it slowly rewires your sense of self. This is where many people feel confused. They know something feels off, but they can't explain it. They feel drained, but they can't point to one big moment that caused the exhaustion. That's because control isn't usually loud or explosive. It's quiet, it's steady. It's disguised as love, concern, and attention. And when someone controls you gently, you feel guilty for resisting. You feel guilty for wanting freedom. You feel guilty for wanting space. Controlling people are good at making you feel like the villain for wanting the most basic thing everyone deserves: autonomy. But here's the truth that's hard to hear when you're in it. The version of you they want is not the real you. It's the version they can manage. The version that won't challenge them. The version that won't walk away. And to create that version, they need to convince you that your voice is too loud, your needs are too much, your boundaries are unreasonable. They need you to believe that you can't trust your own instincts. That's why recognizing the shift matters so much. The moment you start noticing the pattern is the moment their control loses its power. When you wake up to the fact that you've been adjusting your personality to keep the peace, you start asking the questions they don't want you to ask. Why am I always the one changing? Why do I feel anxious around someone who claims to love me? Why do I feel smaller in a place where I'm supposed to feel safe? Once you start asking those questions, the spell breaks. You start seeing things for what they are, not what you hope they could be. You stop blaming yourself for every argument. You stop walking on eggshells. You stop apologizing for emotions that are perfectly human. You begin to understand that conflict is not the problem, control is, and no amount of love can make control feel like safety. The most powerful shift happens inside you. You begin to realize that love shouldn't be conditional on how small you're willing to become. Love shouldn't punish you for having a life outside the relationship. Love shouldn't shame you for growing, improving, expanding. Someone who genuinely cares will never be threatened by your independence. They'll celebrate it. They'll support it. They'll encourage it, because real love doesn't limit your world. It helps you build a bigger one. And when someone starts limiting it, that's your sign to pause, to step back, to look at the full picture instead of the moments they apologize or act sweet. Control often hides behind temporary kindness, but kindness is not change. Apologies are not change. Soft moments are not change. Real change shows up consistently in actions that don't need to be begged for. The truth is, you don't owe anyone your silence just to keep the peace. You don't owe anyone your identity just to avoid arguments. You don't owe anyone your freedom just because you love them. The moment you understand this, you take back the part of yourself they were hoping you'd never reclaim. Your voice, your clarity, your power. And once you get those back, the relationship can never control you the same way again. Love supports your growth, control fears it. That one line is the difference between a relationship that builds you and a relationship that breaks you. Real love wants to see you become bigger, stronger, wiser, more confident. Control wants the opposite. It wants you predictable, dependent, easier to manage. And the moment someone starts fearing your growth, the relationship stops being about the two of you and starts being about their comfort. That's the shift most people don't notice soon enough because it doesn't happen in one moment. It happens every time you try to rise, and they pull you back with a question, a comment, a doubt, or a demand that slowly dims your light. When someone loves you, your success doesn't scare them. Your confidence doesn't threaten them. Your ambitions don't push them away. They don't feel the need to shrink you so they can feel secure. Instead, they show up as someone who stands beside you, not someone who stands above you. They don't compete with you. They don't compare themselves to you. They don't act like your growth is a problem. They treat it like a privilege to witness. They feel honored that you trust them enough to grow around them. That is what love does. It celebrates who you're becoming, not who you used to be. But control is different. Control panics when you start growing. It panics when you start thinking for yourself, when you make new friends, when you gain confidence, when you heal from old wounds, when you discover new parts of yourself. Control reads your growth as a threat. It sees your independence as a danger. It interprets your happiness as something that might make you realize you deserve better. And because of that fear, controlling people try everything to bring you back to a smaller, quieter version of yourself. Not because that version is better for you, but because it's safer for them. The methods they use are subtle at first. When you talk about a new dream, they might laugh a little or say it's unrealistic. When you're excited about something new in your life, they might act uninterested or annoyed. When you start improving your habits, working out, studying more, earning more, taking care of yourself, they call it unnecessary or accuse you of changing. They use the word changing like it's an accusation, not a compliment. They don't want you to evolve because evolution means strength, and strength means you might not tolerate their behavior anymore. The moment you start rising is the moment control tightens its grip. For example, when you achieve something meaningful, instead of being proud, they might point out the one thing you didn't do perfectly. If you get more confident, they might start nitpicking your flaws. If you gain new friends, they might question your loyalty. If you become more self-aware, they might call you arrogant. Controlling people don't attack your growth directly. They attack the confidence that fuels it. They know if they can make you doubt yourself, they can make you stop growing without ever having to say it out loud. That's why many people stuck in controlling relationships feel confused. They feel wrong for wanting more in life. They feel guilty for being ambitious. They feel like they have to choose between love and personal growth. And that's exactly where control wants you, believing that becoming your best self is somehow unfair to your partner. But the truth is simple. Anyone who is threatened by your growth was never invested in your happiness, only in their control. Love has a very different energy. When you grow, love adapts. When you change, love grows with you. When you heal, love becomes safer. When you dream, love invests in those dreams too. A healthy partner doesn't want to clip your wings. They want to see how high you can fly. They're not afraid of losing you to your growth because they know growth doesn't pull good relationships apart. It strengthens them. There's something incredibly powerful about being with someone who isn't scared of your evolution. Someone who doesn't need you to shrink to feel secure. Someone who encourages you to stretch, to explore, to improve. Someone who sees your confidence as beautiful, not intimidating. This kind of love doesn't keep you grounded out of fear. It helps you rise with support. The hardest part is accepting that some people don't want to grow with you. They want you to stay exactly who you were when the relationship began because that version of you is easier for them to control. It hurts when you realize that the person you love isn't cheering for your progress. It hurts even more when you realize you've been holding yourself back to keep the relationship calm. Many people find themselves lowering their standards, quieting their ambitions, softening their voice, dimming their potential, just to avoid conflict with someone who feels threatened by their growth. But nothing good ever comes from shrinking yourself to make someone else comfortable. That kind of compromise isn't love, it's sacrifice. And it's a sacrifice that strips you of the most important parts of who you are. Because the more you shrink, the more you disconnect from your own identity. You lose the passions that made you feel alive. You lose the dreams that shaped your future. You lose the confidence that helped you fight through life. And eventually you lose the relationship too, because any connection built on control will eventually collapse under its own weight. Growth is not a betrayal. Growth is not disrespect. Growth is not disloyalty. Growth is a sign that you are alive, learning, evolving, becoming better. If someone loves you, they will understand that. If someone loves you, they won't fear your growth. They'll join you in it. And if someone fears your growth, it's because they know a stronger version of you will no longer tolerate the weaker version of them. When love supports your growth, it feels like freedom. When control fears it, it feels like pressure. Love feels like air. Control feels like a cage. And your heart always knows the difference, even when your mind tries to justify the cage's comfort. The moment you stop apologizing for growing is the moment you begin to see who truly stands with you and who only stands with the version of you that bends for them. And once you choose growth over fear, the dynamic of the relationship will never look the same again. The day you stop justifying their behavior is the day you start taking your power back. It sounds simple, but when you've been controlled, manipulated, or emotionally worn down, justification becomes a habit. You learn to explain away their anger. You learn to excuse their inconsistency. You learn to soften their disrespect with stories you tell yourself so the relationship feels less painful. You keep giving them the benefit of the doubt, even after they've taken advantage of it again and again. You defend them to yourself because admitting the truth means you'd have to face what the truth requires: change. And change is hard. Change is scary. Change asks you to choose yourself when you're used to choosing them. But the moment you stop covering for their actions, something powerful shifts inside you. You see things for what they are instead of what you hoped they'd be. Justifying their behavior is how control survives. It's the fuel that keeps the cycle running. Every time they cross a boundary and you explain it away, the cycle resets. Every time they disrespect you and you tell yourself, "It's just their mood," the cycle deepens. Every time you get hurt and you say, "They didn't mean it," the cycle tightens around you. You don't notice how much you're bending because you do it slowly, piece by piece, until you're carrying a version of the relationship that they've done nothing to help you hold. And the more you justify, the more they learn that they can behave however they want, and you'll shape the story to protect them. But here's the truth: the moment you stop rewriting the story is the moment you see the real plot. You notice the inconsistency. You notice the patterns. You notice the way they only apologize when they fear losing access to you, not because they genuinely understand the hurt they caused. You notice how their sorry buys them time, not accountability. You notice how they suddenly become charming right after they push you away, because charm is their reset button. You notice how their behavior has a rhythm: hurt, minimize, charm, repeat, and how your justifications have been the glue holding those pieces together. Stopping the justifications isn't about blaming them, it's about waking up. It's about finally listening to the voice inside you that's been whispering for months or years that something isn't right. It's about trusting your own experience instead of letting them rewrite it for you. It's about acknowledging that your feelings aren't too sensitive, your reactions aren't dramatic, your boundaries aren't overreacting. They're human, they're valid, they're signals. And your signals have been telling you the truth long before your mind felt safe enough to accept it. People who rely on control don't want you to see their behavior clearly. They rely on confusion. They rely on your empathy. They rely on your hope. They rely on your ability to forgive faster than they can change. They rely on your fear of conflict. They rely on your desire to keep the relationship together even when it's pulling you apart. And every time you justify what they did, they gain another inch of control over how you see yourself, how you see them, and how you see the relationship. The day you stop justifying their behavior is the day their control starts to fall apart, because you begin breaking the psychological contract they built with you. You stop absorbing the blame that isn't yours. You stop carrying responsibility for emotions they refuse to manage. You stop making excuses for wounds they keep reopening. You stop shrinking yourself so they don't feel insecure. You stop letting their comfort be more important than your peace. The moment you refuse to make their choices seem prettier than they are, you reclaim the clarity they hoped you'd never find. Clarity doesn't come all at once. It arrives slowly, like light coming through a window at sunrise. It starts with small realizations. You replay a conversation in your mind and notice the manipulation instead of the apology. You reflect on an argument and realize you weren't wrong. They just didn't want to be held accountable. You remember the promises and notice how few were ever kept. And then you see a bigger picture you've been avoiding. A picture where you've been giving so much more than you've been receiving. A picture where love feels like pressure, not peace. A picture where you've been adjusting yourself to maintain the connection while they've done nothing to adjust the way they treat you. Once that picture becomes clear, it becomes almost impossible to unsee it. That's the beginning of your power. Because when you see the truth, you start asking questions they don't want you to ask. Why does love feel like walking on eggshells? Why am I always the one forgiving? Why do I feel smaller with someone who claims to love me? Why am I losing myself while trying to keep us together? And the more you question, the more the old justifications fall apart. You start to realize that your excuses were protecting them, not protecting the relationship. They were keeping you loyal to a version of the relationship you wished existed, not the one you were living in. And when you stop protecting the illusion, you start protecting yourself. You begin choosing your peace over their comfort. You begin choosing your voice over their control. You begin choosing your truth over their stories. Taking your power back doesn't always mean leaving immediately. Sometimes it means setting boundaries they didn't expect. Sometimes it means speaking up in moments you used to stay quiet. Sometimes it means refusing to accept half love packaged as full effort. Sometimes it means detaching emotionally, even if physically you're still present. And sometimes, yes, it means walking away from what you once begged to work. But no matter the outcome, the moment you stop justifying their behavior, the relationship can no longer function the way control wants it to. You've broken the pattern. That is the moment you begin standing up for the parts of yourself that have been ignored, silenced, underestimated, or dismissed for too long. It's the moment you start treating yourself with the love you kept giving to someone who didn't know how to hold it. And once you reclaim that love, that clarity, that awareness, your heart becomes a place where manipulation can't root itself so easily again. Because the strongest version of you is not the one who justifies someone else's behavior. It's the one who finally recognizes you never had to.